And we were waiting for you because we needed you to have quorum to start the meeting. So.
Sorry. I came in from Cultus and I got stuck behind lots of big trucks.
Oh yes, I know. The freeway needs some widening. So Mayor did mention that yesterday at the press conference too. I had an opportunity to speak to that needing change. So.
Hi Alex, can you hear us okay?
Oh. Can you hear us, Alex? Yeah, okay, great. So we're good to go? Yes, perfect. I'll call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda, or second, I guess, is an adoption of the agenda. Is there someone that can move the adoption? Moved by Jesse, seconded by Jared, thank you. Adoption of meeting minutes that were from November 16th. Is anyone willing to move that recommendation? Alex, thank you, Alex P. Moving it and seconded by Jesse. We only have one report, but I am going to pass the floor over to Gabriel really quickly. He just had a housekeeping announcement he wanted to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for members of the committee, I know it's a common practice when we get emails, people don't often respond or send a response, so they'll just accept a meeting invite. Just a general reminder, friendly, if you get an invite for us for a meeting, please actually respond to it. It just lets us know if you're coming or not. Sometimes we don't get it and we have no idea if we have quorum or not or anything's coming. So if you could just actually send us a response, we really appreciate that.
Thank you. Great. So no delegations or presentations and just one report as item number 6, the Abbotsford point in time count and homelessness action plan update. And Mike Sikora is going to lead us through that. Mike, your title, Housing, Homelessness, and Community Development Specialist.
I work with homelessness.
Yes, yeah, you have a very large portfolio, so I'll pass it to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Mike Sikora, and so I have the privilege of working for the city of Abbotsford, and I work with a small number of individuals. We have 4 people on our team currently that do a variety of things as we intersect with community and other social agencies and senior levels of government to support pieces and attempt to manage what is challenges relating to homelessness and housing and some social issues that really intersect with that. A little bit about me is my background. I've been in this field for going on 17 years. So I started out as a frontline shelter worker. I worked for the province in doing kind of outreach work. Then I transitioned and went to school. I moved and I went to school and I got a bachelor and a master's in social work, and then I ended up working in Fraser Health. So I had one of my all-time favorite jobs was working on an ACT team in downtown Surrey. So working with the police and working with individuals with psychotic disorders and giving injections in McDonald's bathrooms and things like that. So there's a lot of excitement with that. So I've seen a few different layers of this world, and I've spent the last 8 years or so in local government, in the last almost 3 of those here in Abbotsford. And I often will say this as well as some of the things that we talk about. There are varying opinions and perspectives on it. Throughout my journey, I've got a family that's struggled with substance use, homelessness, incarceration. There's been a whole bunch of that stuff. So not only do I sit on this side with the kind of education, but I also have a level of lived experience at varying levels as well. So I try to present in such a way that's well-rounded, non-judgmental. Sometimes I have thoughts, but they're never from a place of judgment of this person or this is bad. It's just this is what it is. And so it's a very unique role that we hold within the city as we work with our community agencies to try to push the rock uphill, so to speak. For those that know, sometimes it's not common knowledge that local governments or municipalities, we don't get a lot of resources to do this, nor do we have a lot of autonomy or control over legislation or policies or direction. So we, more often than not, most often, we look to senior government. So we work with the province through BC Housing, who holds a lot of the funds for the province around housing, around shelter, around outreach, around rent supplements and things like that. So we ask and we wait. And so that is really a funnel from the province with respect to a lot of those services. And then when we look at things like mental health, addiction, substance use, and stuff like that, again, that comes from the Provincial Health Authority through Fraser Health. And so we kind of, I often say we sit in the middle and with purpose or with intent. A lot of it is supporting how things land in our community. the times is advocating around balancing, community services and good delivery of service with community impact. And then sometimes we do what we do, which is, zoning, roads, fire, things like that. So we kind of hold a unique role and place within there. And often people look to us as the ones with the answers or the power. We don't want to place blame, but we play in the sandbox or we sit at the table, but often we're looking upwards for some of those responses. So we are not immune. I often talk to a lot of businesses that are sharing their frustrations around certain pieces or successes of things that they've seen with programs that are implemented. And I often remind people that we, being not immune, we had a fire in City Hall 18 months ago or whatever it was in 2022 that we were out of our first floor for half a year or more that cost considerable amounts of money related to the same challenges that business might have just called me about. So we're not a home free zone for any of that. We are sitting on the same boat as the rest of our community. And so that's often a conversation I get to have with individuals. I was told that I have 2 hours today and I'm practicing because next week I have to speak to 3 different classes of grade 5s and grade 6s on this. So I'm going to try to get all my time out here in short there. I have a few slides. We'll try to go through them fairly quickly. We're going to start with a little bit of an overview of the point in time count, and then we'll talk about some of the work that we do internally with respect to how do we work and walk alongside those different partners that we have in our community. So I'll start with the point in time count. I'm not sure what levels of familiarity are with that here, so I'll just give an overview. The count was done March 7th and 8th in 2023. It's a tri-annual count. So it's a count that the Fraser Valley Regional District oversees the process of doing the count and qualifying and quantifying the data that is collected. We are doing our count in alignment with a number of other municipalities, provinces, and the federal government. Certain timelines now, post-COVID, there was a little bit of variance in that, but they're looking at realigning us at the end of this year, so we actually get to do another count this year. It is, as I mentioned, overseen by the Fraser Valley Regional District, and so we are one of the municipalities that sit at the table with that. There's Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Mission, and Hope, and then the surrounding area around Hope. Locally, more than 20 stakeholders contributed to the count, so we have a number of partnering agencies, and I'll just talk about that in just a slide or two. The objectives are to identify trends related to homelessness, contribute to regional and provincial and federal understandings of what is homelessness. So it's not just about quantifying, it's about qualifying and about looking at the different trends and reasons why people might be experiencing homelessness or factors that are contributing to them experiencing it for longer than one would hope. We utilize the point in time count, and we're working on increasing our arsenal, but we often utilize the point in time count for advocacy. If we know that we're seeing X amount of percent increase or in a certain demographic, we may use that in our conversations with the provinces that highlights the need for certain types of housing or certain types of supports in said housing. We often use it even here to inform some of our policy. We look at our parks bylaws and whatnot. A lot of that is dependent on what are we learning through the information we're gathering on a regular basis. So the methodology for the PIT count, point in time PIT count, is that we do it over a 24-hour period. It's consistent, so like I mentioned, when we formulate our questions, we have to be consistent with the provincial, the government or the provincial body that oversees this, but now more so with the federal body, and I'll talk about why later on, but because we have a strong attachment to the federal government with some of the resources we receive here. They are generally in line. We have some variance. We can ask a few different questions, but 21 or 24 of the questions need to be almost word for word the same across the board. There are 2 components. So when we're doing the PIT count, we start at night and we enumerate individuals. We work with our shelter providers to capture the number of individuals that are in shelters. We aim to have our shelter providers ask questionnaires. They generally take 10 to 15 minutes long to ask a bunch of questions, which is where we get a lot of this information from, is that questionnaire. Nobody's required to take it. Sometimes we're just looking at what is the count of people that are in the beds. And then the following day, as I mentioned, it's over 24 hours, so we start at like 7 o'clock one night, we finish at 7 o'clock the next night. There are a variety of teams that are out in community where folks may be either congregating, sleeping at night. We do a few magnet events and whatnot, and we try to, again, ask those same surveys for individuals. So we take the numbers of the individuals we've seen or have identified as experiencing homelessness, and then we also take the information from the surveys. It's quite a process. It takes some dollars and some time, and it's a lot of individuals because we really rely on our local agencies and their capacity and their relationships with individuals to facilitate, especially in the surveys parts of it. We've in the past, I've been doing these counts for a number of years, we've looked at volunteers, but it's much better when you have somebody that has expertise in this field and people that have relationships with the individuals to be sitting down or walking into an encampment to talk to people. So we largely, 99% of it is folks that are associated with in this realm or this layer of service in our community and have relationships with people. One of the things that, in doing an enumeration of an account is a positive thing, but some of the challenges that we experience in this count is very voluntary. So if we see, Frank under the tree down there, and he doesn't want to give us a survey or he doesn't want to answer any of our questions, we know that he's experiencing homelessness. We know he's been out there for 3 years. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't get counted. This is just the way that it's been done historically. This information comes straight from the PIT document. We know that it's an undercount based on some of those factors. Also, one of the challenges that we've come up against is if you're not out there in an encampment, like couch surfing, or it's a big thing. People that don't have access to a space where they can pay rent for a month or 2 months or 3 months, we don't necessarily see them in that 24 hours. They may be at McDonald's, they may be at their friend's house. Sometimes, too, there are trends in communities, and we've seen this around the province and in other parts of Canada, where there may be a little bit of momentum to say, you know what, we're not going to be a part of that stuff, and we're going to, we'll see a large part of the population hide and say, no, we're not doing it, we're not doing it. And so that, there's some variance in the numbers, but the trends remain the same. So let's talk about some of these trends right now. Overall, in the Fraser Valley Regional District, we did see an increase. There was an increase seen of 22%. So the number between Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Mission, and Hope is 1,094, up from less 200 the year before, 895. And so what we're seeing similar increases in all the municipalities within the Fraser Valley Regional District. Just a few points from overall, and then I'll get specific into Abbotsford. So there's been a 216% increase in the last 10 years. Now in Abbotsford, I think that number is around 78%. A majority of it's coming from our surrounding municipalities. That doesn't mean that our number is completely accurate. We're all seeing increases as we drive on the roads and we walk through our community. So we know that there's increases. In this last count, 91 people were staying inside a vehicle. That's a new trend that we're seeing more and more of. I mean, if you look at some of our Ministry of Transportation, truck parkings and in places like that, we're seeing more and more individuals, Cole Road, Bradner, some of our off-ramps at some of our major highway arterial off-ramps. We're seeing more and more RVs and people camping in spaces like that in parking lots. And this is across the community. This isn't just Abbotsford, it's across the region, across the province. Income from employment, this is an interesting point, and these are taken from some of their key findings, is down. It's the lowest rate in a long time, but what we're seeing is disability is at its highest. So people who are experiencing homelessness, who are receiving income assistance, that number, just regular welfare, if I could say, without levels of disability or income assistance, is decreasing. But the number of individuals collecting persons with disabilities, which means you have to meet a number of criteria to be able to get PWD, which includes a level of disability and inability to work. That number is growing and continues to grow. And so, that speaks to some of the complexities and some of the folks that we're engaging with on a regular basis. We're seeing that people are remaining homeless for longer. It used to be that individuals could get into, experience homelessness, fall out of housing for some reason, whatever that was, and there were many opportunities for us to get them back into some level of housing. Those opportunities are decreasing for various reasons, economic reasons, availability reasons, but also you couple that with some of the challenges that individuals that continue to fall into homelessness are experiencing and the complexities. It makes it a real challenge. And so as a result of that, we're seeing folks on the streets for longer, which then is increasing health issues and service calls and whatever, whether it's for the individual or the community. We're just seeing increases in that realm. Second last bulleted point, we're seeing this is reported data. So this is what individuals would report when they're asked the questions. 58% reported having addiction issues, with 41% seeking treatment. Treatment was described as a number of different things, but it wasn't necessarily or only I want to go to detox or residential treatment. It might be opioid agonist treatment, or it might be opioid replacement therapy, or the various types of responses that the medical community supports for individuals who are living with a relationship with substances. Interesting, and this is an important note, that 54% also identified as having a mental health issue. So we're talking about concurrent disorders here. So individuals who might be using substances, but also might have a diagnosable mental health issue. And this isn't the stat that says that, but we see that in a slide further down that actually puts those together as one of their points. I'm just identified that as a theme. And this is one that we often hear when we have conversations. Where did folks come from? How long have they been here? Well, for almost 50% of the individuals that were counted have lived in their community for 10 plus years. I don't want to move. I like my community. And similar to folks who are in communities and been there for a while, and whatever they're going through, community is an important factor for people. And so when people are moving, there's usually pieces associated with that, but more often, I would say more often not, according to this, 46% of those people have been here for long periods of time. Back to Abbotsford. So in our community, we have seen a slight increase from 333 people to 406 individuals experiencing homelessness in our community. Again, so this makes up the total, or a part of the total of the over 1,000 for the Fraser Valley Regional District. Various considerations that we think about, and we'll talk about some of those things as we go through. In our community, when the count was done, there were 9 shelters, totaling approximately 200 beds. Normally, when it's not EWR, so when we did this, the count, it was extreme weather response time, so the province opens up additional beds in the cold weather season, and so we had additional beds. Normally, we write about 140 shelter beds, between 140 and 150, depending how which pocket they take the money out of is which number they give us that day. So we know it's somewhere around that. At the time, we also had 7 encampments that were on ministry land. So if you look from Radnor to Cole Road, there's about 7 places. There were about 7 places that had fairly significant encampments on them. And so the teams went out and did outreach to those encampments and did their best to both enumerate and interview individuals. One of the pieces around that is, depending on the camp that you go to, every different area in our community has different populations that have different needs and different relationships with different complexities. That's a mouthful. But if you go to one camp, it might be folks that, they're experiencing homelessness. They may have a $40,000 RV or a number of them, and they may be going to work throughout the day, but they just can't afford rent. So, one of the challenges there is, when are folks there? So, we know that there were certain amounts of individuals in certain areas, but getting the information from individuals wasn't as easy as one might sound, because not everybody is there for the day or for the duration of this 24-hour snapshot count. And then we looked at various parks locally, and again, as I mentioned earlier on, couch surfing is one of the biggest challenges, because they are still individuals who are of no fixed address and who have nowhere to stay, but they may be warm that morning or that day, sitting on a couch or doing something, or out and about on transit looking for jobs, or whatever that might be. And so, again, back to the general themes here, that enumeration might not be has room for improvement, and we'll talk about that, what we're going to be doing around that towards the end of the presentation. When we look at our individuals who are experiencing homelessness, the count asks a number of questions. What is your age? What is your demographic? How do you identify as far as ethnicity? Where do you come from? What are some of the medical challenges that you have? That includes addiction, brain injury. What is your history around engagement or involvement in child welfare services? Were you in foster care as a kid, or were you in public services or emergency services, fire, army, police, things like that? And so some of this information is from those questions. So what was seen in this count is a reduction in youth. Historically, we've seen youth go up. This count in Abbotsford, we actually we interviewed only 12 people versus 23 from our last count. 12 youth. We're talking under 19. We are seeing so red is down and black is up. We're seeing the number of individuals between 30 and 49 has increased in the last 3 years. Same with over 65. We're seeing the senior population increasing, and there are various reasons around that, and I want to be a little bit careful on what I say, because some of it's just anecdotal, but we see it and we hear it, but there's not a piece of paper to stand on to say it. But we know individuals on fixed incomes, their incomes are not increasing at the same rate as cost of living. So when you're talking about seniors, our seniors may not have the same challenges as somebody who has been out there for 5 years and is, has a relationship with substances or mental health. It could be primarily economic and financial. So if your CPP and your OAS has only got up 3%, Canadian Pension Plan and Old Age Security has only got up 3% in the last 5 to 7 years, but your rent has gone from $700 to $1,800. We're seeing that as a big challenge. Same with single moms who struggle to work and may just be keeping their head above water and are on a level of income assistance with 2 kids at home. You're getting $1,450 or $1,600 or something like that from your income assistance, but your rent for maybe a 2-bedroom is $1,800 to $2,100, and you're paying your utilities, you're paying for food, you're paying for all those things. So we're seeing a lot of economic challenges and a shift in the folks that are experiencing homelessness in our community. And I think we'll see a little bit more of that even as we look at our next point in time count later on this year and doing it from a different approach. Really what we're seeing is more as the ages get older, the individuals that were counted and talked to, though they're experiencing homelessness for longer for various reasons. When we talk about addiction, 202 people identified as having an addiction. Of that, almost 50% said they had a mental health issue as well. So that's where I go back to concurrent disorders. And from my experience and when I worked in the health authority, there was a real challenge. How do you deal with addiction when somebody has a mental health issue? And it was almost, I can't do this until you do this. And the other team saying, I can't do this until you do this. And so there's ongoing kind of a tug of war in how we address those needs, or how those needs are addressed, and just the methods to do that. And then another piece of this, and you're remiss if I didn't say, is personal agency. A lot of what we talk about, engaging in the point in time count is voluntary. Engaging in services is voluntary. So there are some opportunities, and it's some days can be tougher than others. Polysubstance use are folks that are out there that are using. That just means you're using more than one substance. So you're using various substances. Crystal meth, opiates, alcohol and cocaine. If you would have done this, we asked a different question this year: is what drugs do you use? We listed drugs. Do you use this drug? Do you use this drug? Do you use this drug? If you would have done that same question 10 years ago, you would have seen cocaine is the highest. They're shifting, and opiates, it used to have been heroin. Now it's fentanyl, and so there's a lot of shifts in those available opportunities for individuals out there that are using on the streets. And it's really changed the dynamics even for our shelter workers. And what are they dealing with, and how are they addressing individuals as they come into their sites? One drug you might have a response from an individual one way, but on the other drugs there's various different responses that they're constantly having to shift and change on how they respond to situations. As I mentioned earlier on, affordability. When we look at fixed income, if you don't have an ability or lack of ability to be able to find a job or a full-time job, or even if you are working and you're working at a $20 an hour job and you have 2 children, if you haven't had the luxury like some of us to go to school or to be in business or to do whatever that is where we can make an income that can afford some of the leisures of life, affordability is a big challenge. We're seeing the rents. I remember when I was doing rent supplement programs 10 years ago, our 2 bedrooms were $650 to $900. Now you're hard pressed to find a 1-bedroom basement suite for anywhere under $1,500. And in addition to that, the vacancy rate is like below 1%. So the landlord can choose between 50 different people to rent that 1-bedroom basement suite. So these are all factors that continue to speak into the experiences we're challenging. And as I mentioned earlier on the duration of homelessness, we're seeing as a result of all these factors, we're seeing people remain homeless for longer, which then exacerbates personal challenges and community challenges, more personal challenges, right? Because once you've been in that realm for 5, 6, 8 years, you become accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Your community is of such, and your health issues and other challenges pop up, and moving individuals, and we're seeing this, we're hearing this a lot from our service providers and from the province, getting individuals that have been in chronic homelessness for a long period of time into housing and then managing that housing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there to, one, get them in there and then manage that so we can retain housing for individuals. So just continued continued challenges in that realm. And really it's a little bit of an overview of the point in time count. We do have a copy of it on our website, as well as there's a copy, I think we have both the Abbotsford and the regional count on our website. We will be, I don't know if I have this in the slides, so we will be doing, I got a bunch more slides here. We will be doing another count at the end of this year. The federal government has asked us to do another count. So normally it's been every 3 years, but because we're a federally funded community for a certain amount of money going into a community, we get to, I actually am looking forward to it. We get to do another count, but it's not over 24 hours. We get the liberty or the luxury of doing it over, I believe, anywhere between a week and a month. We're just waiting for those parameters to come down from them to tell us what that is. And so we'll be doing that again this fall. Similar questions, methodology is going to change a little bit. So looking forward to that. One of the things is, how do we respond to that? So as a community, and as many communities around, we developed a homelessness action plan. This homelessness action plan guides the internal workings of how do we engage with and intersect with community and internally to work within our lanes and support organizations in our community as individuals as we continue through this journey. It was approved by council in 2022, and again, it looks to augment provincial efforts. There are 5 high-level goals. I won't go into too much depth through this. I'll highlight some of the pieces and maybe some of the wins, and then we'll wrap up. And if there's time for questions, or if it's a part of this, I'm happy to answer questions. So the 5 high-level goals, really an overview, is we look at how do we support organizations in the community to strengthen the services. How do we look at our internal policies, whether it's bylaws, training, or land use, and how do we use that to support positive and forward movement in this realm? How do we coordinate and convene stakeholders in the community? We know that relational capacity is a big thing, and sometimes it's not bricks and mortar, but it's just how do we work together to do things and positive outcomes. Another one is advocacy. How do we advocate our needs to senior government or to community, whatever that may look like. And then finally, develop strategies for tracking, understanding, and communicating progress on homelessness. So there's a lot of words here. I won't speak to all of them. But overall, strengthening community-based services and updates is, the key ones in here is, are we looking at exploring opportunities to identify land that might be municipally owned or provincially owned that would be a positive for increasing housing stock or shelter stock or services in our community. And in our community, we've had the privilege of having a number of city-owned sites that we've entered into lease agreements with the province to develop housing on it, and we're looking forward to some movement with the province on some other stuff as we move through this winter and the spring. And again, some of that will intersect with what is the work that we're doing with opportunities for lands and sites like that. We've also been working with, as I mentioned, the Ministry of Transportation and exploring opportunities for the province to use the province's land for some of those services where we have various needs in our community. When we talk about assisting community-based services with cultural supports, we are not service providers here, but our role is how can we be a backbone organization for some of the work that's done. And so how can we be conveners, information disseminators, and collaborators to help bring things together where we may have a more siloed landscape. And so I'll speak a little bit more about Abbotsford Access in a couple of slides, but Abbotsford Access is our vehicle or our mechanism for that. And then again, Abbotsford Access, you'll hear throughout here, it's about partnerships and working together. We can do better together than by alone, and we take that fairly seriously. We take that seriously here as it does our community. And then how do we just inform community what's going on? Is there funding opportunities? Again, Abbotsford Access, but I'll go into it a little bit more. How do we look at our internal response to homelessness? So there are a variety of things that municipalities can explore and do that are supporting positive momentum in community. Whether it's our parks bylaw, right? We've had to explore opportunities internally and looking at how we provide and manage both provide for individuals when there's inadequate shelter resources for individuals to sleep overnight, but how do we balance that with community safety for parks users? And so we're constantly looking at different policies, different communities, what is safe for individuals, keeping in mind that as a municipality we want the community to be safe for all individuals. So we're constantly looking at things like that. In 2022, we reviewed our extreme weather plans when we're talking about post-flood. So we're talking about fires, our emergency responses that are needed. We made sure that we had opportunities in there, or we made sure that we had in there individuals experiencing homelessness. Who are the point people? How do we make sure that we've considered all pieces in our community? we would look at some of our policy and zoning reviews. If there's certain types of, initiatives in our community that are really successful, how can we make sure that they're in the right areas of town? How can we make sure that they're really, adding to community momentum and synergy? And on the other side of that coin too, if we're looking at things that are problematic or challenging, how are we looking at addressing those and managing them to the best of our ability within our powers? I'll keep going. This one's got a couple of slides to it, but internal city staff capacity is another one as well. This work is fairly new, and fairly new, I mean, it's been going on for 5 or 7 or maybe 8 years within municipalities, but historically it's been something that's been outside of city purview. And so we look at how are we training our staff. So our parks and recs, for example, they do a lot of initiatives in the parks. So how can we equip our staff through education, training, just tips and tricks on engaging with people that could have a potential for some challenging outcomes. And so we provide opportunities to do that. We've done a number of trainings for our parks community, our parks services, we looked at funding opportunities to augment, because we know that straight enforcement is maybe not necessarily the best way. So how can we give some wraparound supports when we're going into situations heavy-handed, if so to speak? If we have our Abbey PD or our city bylaw having to go in and move people along, it's one thing to move people along and say, hey, you can't be here. But it's another thing if we can say, hey, we have access to resources. We're happy to give you a ride. We're happy to do this. I just made a call for shelter. That's not necessarily work that the enforcement team does, but we've applied for funding and been able to support Cedar Outreach, which is actually not only supports Abbey PD and city bylaw, but they support a number of businesses in our community as well as a first response to homelessness, because police are not always the answer. We love our police, don't get me wrong. It's not always the answer to some of these challenges that we're experiencing. And then partnering and engaging. So we sit on a number of community advisory committees. So if we have, probably all are aware of the Red Lion downtown, and people's perceptions or perspectives around what that would be like. Now, it's been phenomenal. It's been great, but we get to sit on some of those committees of individuals that intersect with businesses and residents and service providers, and we get to engage that, identify challenges if there are challenges, and be proactive on solutions. So that's just an example of some of the ways that we do. Again, I mentioned I'm presenting to community in a couple of weeks to a bunch of to kids. That's fun. I like to do that. I have the privilege of presenting to a variety of different layers or demographics in our community on similar things like this. This is where I talk about Abbotsford Access, and I won't talk about it too long, but Abbotsford Access is the way that we have become the backbone organization for a lot that is synergy in Abbotsford. We developed this 2 years ago, I believe, and really the intent of it is how do we bring together service providers to look at various layers of the social service network, and how do we look at building relational currency and capacity to address issues. It's not always bricks and mortar. Sometimes it's synergy and bringing together organizations to try to address niche areas within our realm. Sometimes it's education events. We do things like, one of the things that we developed was the street card. And this is a card that has a ton of services on it, and we hand it out to businesses. Our Abbey PD, our fire department keeps it. And it's a pocket-sized card that we see handed out. We just ordered 5,000 of these. They'll probably be gone in 2 months. And it goes to a lot of people who use those. It's just an example of some of what we do. But as you look at that, that's also an example of a lot of the stakeholders and partners that are, working daily on trying to support individuals and then manage the community impact and manage individuals' lives or walk alongside them as they're walking through this. Through Abbotsford Access, we have a weekly mail-up. We have, I think we're now almost at 500 individuals or email addresses on that are local stakeholders. We've done a number of events. I think we did 5 in 2023, and we're doing 8 or 9 in 2024. Those are events and networking events. So not only do we provide a level of education and update for different services in our community, but there are opportunities for intentional networking and getting to know who's who in the zoo in the realm that we might be talking about. We do events on food poverty reduction, so food equity, that's coming up actually next week. We're going to be doing one in April that's on housing homelessness. So I'll give a similar presentation like this, but we also have BC Housing presenting, and we have a couple other community agencies that are talking about the work they're doing in the housing realm. And again, as I mentioned, this is often an opportunity to network. And sometimes I might know about an organization, but if I know the right person to pick up the phone and call, I get a lot further than if I'm just sending a random email to an info desk. And that's continuing to grow. We, in our events, I remember doing this in another community, we would regularly have 50 to 60 individuals at our events. Here we're getting north of 100 almost every event, and continues to grow. Our network continues to grow. The information we send out every week. So we act as a network hub or an information hub, or we try to act as an information hub, and it's dependent on how much information we receive for agencies. But every Thursday we send out a Thursday afternoon mail up, and that is comprised of all the information we receive from agencies or organizations in our community in this realm, and we send it out so that everybody in our network can know what's going on, whether it's updates, job postings, grant opportunities, things like that. So we worked really hard at building that network and the underpinnings of really what is a foundation for our community to work together on these issues. And there's a lot of synergy. I mean, we were blown away by the want and the desire by the community when we started this 2 years ago to bring people together, because it's really hard working alone, especially in this realm. More clients than staff, harder. The barriers are increasing on a regular basis. So when we can come together and talk about some of these things, we're finding great value in that. And we coordinate services. So again, I mentioned earlier on, we're not a service provider. However, we have the unique ability and I don't use the word power, but a position where we can pull folks together, and we have a level of influence on some of how we work together in our community. And so we're doing that, we're developing what's called a coordinated access system that's tied to our federal funding. We get $1.5 million a year from the federal government. It's very labor intensive to manage the expectations of the federal government, but one of the pieces is developing a coordinated access system. So what that means is, how do we as a community and agencies work together to ensure that any individual that walks into any door of any service have equal and equitable opportunities to access all services, and how can we share that information so that if I walk into Jared, your store or your business or your service, I don't have to then walk into Jesse's services to tell the same story, because we're sharing that information through a information management system, and so we can continue to walk alongside somebody in their journey, and it's not fragmented or siloed between organizations. So we're really in the spirit of that community collaboration. This is a layer of it that we're really leaning into, and so we're really hoping that as we get through this year, we're going to have a framework and the information management system that we can utilize from the provincial government that all agencies in our community will use. And historically, and in other provinces in the community, this has been in Canada, this has been done for a lot of years. We have some challenges here in BC for various reasons, but we're pushing through those. Those are senior government challenges, and we're looking forward to seeing the same outcomes that other communities are doing with just how they serve individuals, which as we serve individuals better, we see a reduction in challenges and more opportunities to get into housing and meet needs of which.
Mike, do you want to unpack for this committee that you said we get $1.5 million a year, but that $1.5 million doesn't come to the city? That $1.5 million is just administered by the city and goes to community. I just want to make sure that that's clear. We don't. The city of Abbotsford doesn't get that money. We are the stewards of that money and making sure that it goes to community. So just wanted to clarify that one point. It just, you had said that, I was like, I just didn't want to miss it.
Maybe I jumped the gun by saying that, but I have a slide that speaks to our granting program. And
Perfect.
So we do have the opportunity and privilege to be a flow through for community dollars. And that grant is one of them. So it's not our money, it doesn't stay in our pockets. Advocacy, I mean, this one's straightforward. How do we advocate? We advocate senior government through a number of layers. We've had minister visits out here. We are regularly engaging with senior staff at provincial levels to share our needs and our successes and what that looks like, whether it's health or housing or justice or whatnot. So advocacy is ongoing, straightforward. Tracking, again, I mentioned coordinated access, point-in-time counts, and this beautiful system that we're hoping to be able to implement later on in 2024, that at the touch of a button, you can generate reports that would include anybody experiencing homelessness or walking through the doors of any social services in our community. De-identify data, we're not talking about for a certain individual or names, it's just trends and data that we can then better use to support the needs of our community. Here's an interesting piece that we're working on right now. We'll get too far into it, but we're looking at developing a community homelessness information application. It's actually started being used a couple days ago by our service providers. First one of its kind, probably in North America. We look at by names list, we look at websites to track data that nonprofits would be putting into it, but we've developed an app through our GIS department that's going to help with that tracking and data on where encampments are. It's not for us, it's not for enforcement purposes, it's to help coordinate and support the organizations that are serving the individuals out there. So that same organization is not going to the same place, or different organizations going to the same place 9 times in 90 minutes. Would be an example of how we're looking at coordinating mental health services, water services, addiction services, whatnot. If we know that X organization's been there 3 hours ago, maybe we'll go over here. And with this tool, partnered with our point-in-time counts, partnered with the information management system we're looking at supporting coming to our community, we should be able to have much better information and up-to-date real-time data on what we're experiencing in our community. To Catherine's point, grant management, as I mentioned, we are a federally funded Reaching Home community. What that means is the federal government gives to the municipality through the city of Abbotsford $1.5 million. Of that $1.5 million, as I mentioned, it's very labor intensive. So there's quite a bit of dollars and expectations that come from this to go towards administration and doing what they tell us to do. They've told us we have to develop coordinated access. It's great, we have to, but they don't give us. They give us $70,000, I think, out of that. When it's going to cost us probably north of $250,000 once you get all the pieces in place. So all of those expectations of the federal government we have to take from this money. In last year, I think we supported. It's maybe slightly off. Last year, I think we had 26 projects. So what we do is we put out a call for proposals under the directives of the program. They tell us you have to do these 5 things. And we have the privilege of working with our community, handing off the funds to our community through a call for proposals process that meets the criteria of the federal government and what they want to see. We do sit in the position where we've developed a community advisory board that we work with community agencies that help support the direction it goes. And so we look at trends, what's really needed in our community, and how do we ensure that those funds go to those areas. And then we go through a fairly rigorous review process. And then we recommend projects to be approved through City Council, and City Council gets to ask questions and speak to those as well, and then we approve them and we fund organizations. So grant dollars we receive because of our needs in the community that we help manage and get out to the community. And we actually just completed another round of that. So we had a call for proposals out from December to January. We spent 7 hours yesterday reviewing 19 applications. We had in total $1 million we were putting out over a year for the next 2 years, and we had $9 million in asks. So a lot of scrutiny and review needs to be done, and due diligence. And then it's really hard to say no to one and yes to another when they're all great organizations and great projects. Like, the need is huge. And so we continue to advocate to the federal government for more resources to address the things that we need to address in our community. That's just one example of the types of grants that we do. We applied for UPCM grants for the last couple of years. We've supported a number of great initiatives in our community. One of my favorites was our partnership between Abbotsford Police Department, MCFD, and Cyrus Center. So an outreach team that actually is going out to address and engage with youth in our community and meet them where they're at. Often we think of Ministry of Children and Family Development, we think of an office worker. We got that office worker out and riding around a police car, and we had their computer with them, so they were able to actually do things right then and there rather than making an appointment for our youth who probably can't get to appointments ever to not have to come to an office in 2 weeks. But let's do that stuff right now, and there was a lot of positive outcome with that, and synergy with the police department as well, breaking down some of the silos and barriers for individuals that would never talk to somebody with a uniform on. Ongoing, this is an ongoing thing, right? As we drive around and look around, we see the need. It's still great. We continue to advocate and work with our partner, senior government partnerships, and work with our stakeholders in our community and look at what are some of the solutions that we can control. If we look at what we can control, we're going to have a much better day than if we look at the things we can't control all day long. We do our advocacy, but we really want to focus on what do we have kind of ability to manage our community, and that's what we've continued to do well. Doing some of that advocacy, and then looking to mayor and council to do that advocacy, and we do that through a lot of information and conversations as well, which is ongoing. I think that's the end of my presentation. I gave you back an hour and 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. I think we'll, open it up for questions or comments from the committee members. Is there anyone? What's a question? Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know if this would touch exactly on what you do, but it's a related topic, and I actually wonder if Susan might be able to comment on it. So you said that it's very hard to track homelessness amongst people that might be couch surfing or living in vehicles, stuff like that. And something I'm very interested in is if there is a large student population that is homeless, living in vehicles. When I was at UBC, that was a very big problem, and the university was well aware of that problem. There's lots of areas around UBC where you can park overnight, and it's fairly well understood that a lot of students do that. And then, of course, there are services available at the university. For example, I don't know what the current status of the partnership between UFB and the city is on recreation, but at UBC, as a student, you use the pool for free, you could shower, etc. And so it was a little bit easier to do that. So I guess I'm just interested if the university tracks it in any sort of way or asks students what their status is.
Absolutely, we work with students. So the
Okay.
Vice President Students Office in Student Affairs works very closely with the student community, domestic, international, to understand and ideally address and mitigate some of the issues that we talked about today. I can certainly get more information on the tracking efforts, and what I wanted to comment on was how impressed I am with this tracking process and your presentation on how you track, understand, and communicate, how critical that is to not waste resources, to direct them where they're the most needed. Why would you have 2 or 3 different services going to the same area when you could spread out? And without that data, without that understanding, it's so easy to be inefficient in the process when resources are so scarce. But I can follow up with more information from our student housing office, our student affairs office. And we just broke ground last week on a new student housing project, which will take a couple of years. And of course, we appreciate the relationship with the city, and I can also find out more around the recreational services. We do have new amenities in our athletics building, so new showers. And again, I can find out if those are made available for students that are struggling with, housing, as well as perhaps, I hope not living in their cars, but I understand the issue.
Yeah, no, when I was a student at UFB in undergrad, I paid $600 a month in rent, and I left for 4 years to go to UBC. And when I came back, my wife and I reached out to the same landlord, and it was $1,500 to rent the same apartment. So I can only imagine that if you don't have parents to live with, I couldn't pay $1,500 a month as an undergraduate student. And it was like the bottom of the rung, right? Like it was a terrible apartment.
Yeah, Mike, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, if I can. Now, I can't speak specifically to university student data. We're seeing, and this is anecdotal, but we hear it all the time, is we're seeing more people living together, right? So that same 2-bedroom space or 1-bedroom space that might have just been you or you and a partner now has somebody sleeping on a couch, somebody there's a bunk bed in the room, and somebody's coming and going. So we're seeing more people pool resources to rent the same place that might have had half the individuals in it before. And I really appreciate the feedback on that. There's been a lot of work done in the last 18 months to pull pieces together. And I work with a really great team and a really great city. So it's whenever we have thoughts or ideas, it's really rapid responses to those things, and our community is really great in supporting this. We ask a lot of our community. Right now, I think one of the folks that I work with is on a meeting. He meets with the same group every 2 weeks and sometimes every week in developing this system and these applications. And they're invested. Our communities invested. Our cities invested, and our communities invested. And we've come a long ways. And we've got some work to do, clearly. But we're not. We're just doubling down on the work that needs to be done.
Amazing, thank you.
Awesome. Other questions? Lynn or Alex, anything online? No.
Maybe I'll just jump
I-
in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Go
Okay.
ahead, Alex. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and thank you for the presentation. This data is so helpful to get a sense of what's really happening on the ground in our community. So, Mike, thank you so much for that. The thing that stood out to me was just engagement with businesses over the next little while, and that you're prioritizing some of that work. And so, just a comment: anything that we can do to support from the chamber side in terms of engaging with our membership, we are so excited to do. And this really is that key issue that intersects our business community so deeply, and folks wanting to support folks living in our community in the most helpful way possible, and also mitigate risk and issues. And so anything that we can do to help to get this information out there and to talk about solutions, we're happy to do that. So thanks for this.
Great. Thanks, Alex. I just had a couple things, or one or two here. I was wondering if you could unpack a little bit I just thought maybe for the committee members or anyone else who might be listening. And so a lot of the comments that I get too are surrounding the encampments that continue to grow. And I know we did have, very, I would call it successfully, Lonzo as well as Clearbrook over the last little while. Can you explain a little bit more about that process and kind of all the different layers that are involved with that, so people maybe can understand it's not as easy as it seems sometimes?
Absolutely. Thank you. Great question. So there's a couple of pieces for it. First, many of our places that we have encampments on, while we as a community know their challenges, they're areas that we have zero jurisdiction on. So provincial lands. And so while we may be, and I'll get to the process in a second, while we may as a community have identified major challenges, risks for whatever reason, we articulate that on a regular basis. And we do our best to work with, in a positive relationship, identifying the challenges and solutions for that. So when we get to a place where the provincial government is ready to respond to their situations, their lands, the process includes a number of key steps. One of them is, first and foremost, or has been historically, is identifying or ensuring that there's adequate spaces for individuals in either shelter or housing. So if you've got 8 people in a camp, we want to make sure that we've set aside, or they want to make sure they set aside 8 vacant spaces in shelters to ensure that when it comes time to do the action phase, the engagement phase, that there are opportunities. It's really hard to move somebody from one place to another place when there's nowhere for them to go. We just say you can't be here. They just end up a block away, and we're doing this again. And so first is the identification and often setting aside spaces for the number of individuals that are there. Second comes in, and sometimes there's some overlap in here. We identify outreach workers that know the individuals that are at that encampment and have been either building relationships with or have opportunities for them for a variety of services. And we start an engagement strategy. So that looks like, and this is where there's overlap. Generally, we would want to go in and inform. When I say we, I mean the community or the response team would go in and identify that here is a place that you are, here is a place that you can be. We're working to address some of the other connection points, but by this time we are coming in here to clean up this area for whatever reason. So maybe it's highway widening, maybe it's public safety issues or whatever that is, but it's an identification of a timeline on when that camp will be closed down. And at the same time, we are going in there every single day. We, again, collective community, going in there every single day with outreach workers, saying, here are the opportunities, here are the beds, is there anything else I can do to support you to get to a place that's not here, because we know that in X amount of days this space won't be here. And so that usually takes place over, more often than not, I've seen it anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. It's never something that we do on a Monday, we put up notification, we have to move on a Wednesday. Now, there are some higher risk situations that timeline might be shorter, but I've generally seen it over weeks to up to a month. And this is something that has been, in Alonzo, it was probably a month and a half or 2 months. But I've seen this process happen a dozen times in the communities I've worked in. And it's the same, it's a straightforward process. It's just a matter of getting the ability to actually do it and move it forward with the individuals. So we're going in there on a regular basis and connecting with the individuals. Do you want services? Can I help you? Here's what's available. Let's take you over here and do this appointment or that appointment. And so as we're leading up to those dates, those visits by nonprofits and outreach would become more frequent, and as well as there's reminders. Hey guys, just FYI, as we know, it's posted here. You've been given the notice. on this day, this is going to be cleaned up, or you're going to have to be out of here. And generally, we have buy-in, especially when we use our outreach workers that have really good relationships with individuals. Like different outreach workers, they know everybody in the community. And so there's fairly decent buy-in in that regard, although we might not love the fact that we're being moved from somewhere. They work well with them. So often it's not, police aren't as required as from a community perspective you might think, or people that drive by might think. It's not a matter of chasing people out of there and arresting them. But we do involve law enforcement just for safety measures, because not everybody loves to leave. We get a little bit persnickety on some days, and understandably so. And so generally, that's the process. We identify a date, a location, a date, outreach workers that are going there on a regular basis, resources for individuals to go to, and then a timeline on what that looks like, and then execution, movement of that camp. And we do it in the kindest way possible. Nobody loves the reality of having to move somebody from where they are. There's various reasons and rationale behind it, but it's always the most person-focused way that we possibly can do that. Even our bylaw are very person-centered. They don't love having to tell. Nobody loves having to engage this for the enforcement side. We understand people are people, but sometimes we just need to do things. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, I just had one other question. I was interested on one of your graphs. There was a fairly significant drop in the city of Abbotsford from 2008 to 2011. And I was interested if that was like just a statistical drop, like in the way people were being counted, if there was a policy that was in place that was successful, or maybe a policy that was successful but we wouldn't necessarily use today. Like what is the reason for that drop?
I think that's a great question.
You want me to answer that as I was here?
Yep.
We had definitely a shift in policy perspective at that time, and our approach was maybe not as person-centered as it could be. So I think there was an evolution of where we got to with how we approach this issue. Certainly, we saw a big change in 2015 when we hired our first homeless coordinator into the position. That was a new approach for Abbotsford, and we placed a much stronger concerted effort on actually understanding who is in our community and where they are. So I think it was a different time, and it was a different way of managing the issue. So we were not as progressive as we could have been with harm reduction in our community either. So there was a big shift in policy direction over that time period. Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to be clear, those people were still here. The folks that experienced
Yes.
homelessness were still here. It's just, and I mentioned this earlier on, sometimes there are seasons where people are like, you know what, I'm not doing this, I'm not engaging with this. And given some of the dynamics that were going on at that time, there was a little bit of a polarization going on. So that was a time when that was taking place. So people didn't want to be counted, didn't want to engage. And so as a result,
Participation in the homelessness count is voluntary as well, right?
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
I'm gonna apologize because I don't know if we'll be asking this right or not, but I guess like the individuals that you're reaching out to, how receptive are they of actually wanting the help?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mentioned earlier personal agency. Personal agency or voluntary ability or desire to move through life. People have various complexities that they're dealing with. Some are very receptive, others love the lifestyle they're living for whatever reason. So, they fall on both sides of the fence on that. I'll give you an example of both sides, right? We have many folks who are living in their cars that when we have outreach workers go and connect with them in the Walmart parking lot or different parking lots, they're keen. Like, I've been looking for housing, I've been trying to pay rent, I can't afford it. And we come alongside them with rent supplements, our families, and it's a very easy process. You have individuals on the other side of that coin that have been, spent 8 or 10 years out there and like the community, like the freedom, and you offer them the shelter beds and you get the California hello, right? Like there are varying levels of what that is and different people. So it's very, very diverse. It's broad, the rationale for that, but people choose their outcomes on different days. But that same person that might tell me where to go on Monday on Tuesday might say, hey, I'm ready to do this. And so that's why we continue to engage. Depending on availability of resources, what has happened in the last 24, 48, 72 hours, what do those dynamics look like in an individual's life? It's one thing when everything's really wonderful and comfortable to the degree that it is or is not, to stay where you're at. But sometimes challenges breed a lot of change too, right? So that's why, for example, we want to ensure that when we're doing the enforcement initiatives with Abbey PD or our city bylaw, we ensure there's an opportunity there for individuals to do something to make that change in that time. And sometimes I boil it down to simple carrot and stick, right? Sometimes with that enforcement, with that need to change behavior, but when you have those doors open in front of you, people are more willing to go through them. So it's a great question.
And then also, I guess like with all with the outreach that you've done as well, and I guess the time that you've done this, have you noticed, is there a certain percentage of people that you, I guess, don't see anymore, like that they've gotten the help that they've needed and now they're 100% off the street or making that effort, or is it a bit of a revolving door, I guess?
That's another great question. If we go back to the point in time count, what it identifies is we're seeing people that are homeless staying homeless for longer. So the percentage of folks that maybe have less complex challenges, we're talking about the concurrent disorders I mentioned. So if I don't have, a personality disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and I'm also a crystal meth user and a heroin user, it's a lot more challenging to see stability found. It happens all the time, or it happens. But for an individual that might just be economically struggling and was evicted because of a rent eviction or whatnot, we see those folks be rehoused a lot quicker, and the supports are less intensive for those individuals. So then we're able to shift our focus really quickly to more individuals that might fit certain criteria. So there's different teams for different levels of needs in our community as well. Different organizations serve different populations. If that answers it.
Yeah.
You mentioned Cedar outreach. And that was kind of like an alternative, like first response or someone you could reach out to for like as opposed to police officers. Was that more for like, or you had said sometimes you don't really want a police officer to come to help with something, and it's like, so the example I have is like there's someone that's beside my field and the garbage keeps coming into the field, and every time I get out clean up the garbage, but it's something where you're like, well, this feels like there's a conflict point coming here where, it's something that's a theoretical situation, but it's like there could be a conflict point coming up here. And I don't want to have to call the police officer for this because this isn't like an emergency, but it's like, so as like public, where like, is that something that is readily able, like we're able to reach out to and talk about, like, find some solutions or to help with?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. If I may, whenever there's a safety concern, I would encourage people, if there's conflict concerns, that police will never get mad at you for calling them. Now, I want to recognize that not every issue when we're talking about poverty and homelessness is police related. So always take the safest approach first. Cedar Outreach is an organization that we use that is the amount of individuals or challenges that are across and span our community. If there were one organization that addressed them all, they would have to be very well staffed more often than not, and I will go back to in a second, more often than not, the outreach organizations. I mean, if you look at that streetcar, there's a number of outreach organizations. They're funded for certain things, right? They do outreach, but they're not your general pick up the phone and call somebody. Cedar is the closest we have to that because they serve a broad population. And they generally operate 7 days a week for longer hours. So if I were at home and I knew some of the landscape and I had an individual camping, but it wasn't necessarily breaking the law yet, I might call and say, hey, I don't want to call the police because I realize this might not be a police issue, but I've got two individuals that are camping in the corner of my building or corner of my lot or my farm. And, I've noticed that certain challenges keep continuing. So I figured I'd give you guys a call, and they would more often than not, or more likely than not, go out and see if they can engage Frank and Bob or whomever is out there and say, hey, listen, here's what's going on before, police get involved. Maybe we can find you a place that might be a little bit more adequate for you and for the neighboring community. But there is not. There are the one that as service providers and as community we know, but there's not one organization that you call this number and somebody can come out and deal with homelessness. That's a considerable amount of resources Not that we wouldn't want that, this is something we look to senior government for those things. And we can supplement some of it through our grant funding that we have, but that's a.
Short answer is, yeah, you can start with Cedar.
Okay, because most of the issues that like the people that like I work with are like farmers is mainly property based. It's not like necessarily someone's coming in and disrupting business. It's more that they're
Impacting.
yeah, they're there and they're not really caught, it's not nothing really legal or illegal, but it's just like something that you want to be able to like, get ahead of or be proactive with any issues that could arise.
Right, and before they become super entrenched in the area, the opportunity to offer them services
Yes.
or housing, you wanna make sure that happens.
Cool, thank you for that.
I often get a lot of those calls too, like,
Okay.
from somebody like yourself, might call and say, hey, I have this, and I pick up the phone and I call Cedar.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would also jump into, I heard it just from staff last week, so hopefully this is correct, but the Abbotsford app that we have, there's an area to report issues as well that can go to bylaw services and also directs you to the APD, like non-emergency line. So I think they still appreciate that because if it goes through the app or it goes through their non-emergency line, then it helps with tracking. So if there's certain areas that are hotspots, like that all helps with their data management. And I see that Anise is gone, but I'm assuming that's correct, that
Yeah.
they want that through there.
Our Abbotsford app does track. I will just make a point of clarification for our bylaw services. We don't attend private property. That's outside of our jurisdiction, so it would be a police call at that point in time. That said, with the new GIA app and also with our coordinated access system, we'll have a better understanding of who is where in the community and that will be recorded by the service providers. So right now, that's the gap, is the service providers aren't, as a group, collecting that data. And that, what Mike's team is working on will change that. So we'll have a much better understanding of our community as a whole.
Awesome. Yeah, Alex?
Yeah, sorry, actually just wanted to make sure I understand this because the Downtown Business Association deals with this a lot. And so there's like a constant stream of questions from business owners about where to go. There was security in place, it kind of sucked. We, I don't think are doing that anymore and looking more to use. I think one of the problems was identified is that business owners were constantly contacting security, and so the city of Abbotsford was not having data on how big of a problem it was, and then we were finding that there was a lack of police presence in the downtown because I think that police presence is streamed based on that data. So if people are using this app as the main resource when they're having a problem, then it effectively communicates that data to the city? Or should they be calling the non-emergency line? Are those two things equivalent? Like what is
I think the app we're referring to is the city app, so city services. So we're talking about downtown unless it's on city land. It might not necessarily be the app you're using. There are three options to contact police. There is the text number, and I don't have that in front of me, but they're fairly quick to respond to that text. It's a non-emergency text.
is that
Similar,
on?
you know what, that is actually something I don't think we put it on
I
there.
don't
So
think
we
so.
need to put it on there. We have,
But SWORD is an opportunity as well, and SWORD keeps data. So the Abbotsford Police Department Street Outreach Team, they are specific for the issue of homelessness.
Okay.
And again, when you're calling the Abbotsford Police Department, they will keep that record, right? So they'll know when their SWORD team has been dispatched to an area, if it's over and over and over again. And I think for businesses, when you're dealing with that street entrenchment impacts in your business community, SWORD is a great opportunity to have them come work with the business community as well. Their entire purpose is street outreach, so
Okay, yeah, I haven't even heard mention of that
yeah, and it's
inside the business community, so I'm not sure that people are aware of it just because, basically we had the introduction of the BC housing unit there a couple years ago and there's been a massive influx of people frequenting businesses and stuff, so.
yeah, your street outreach team with Abbotsford Police Department is a great opportunity. They are an outreach team, they're not an enforcement team, although they have the ability to do so if it escalates, so.
And sorry, so how are they contacted? Just so there's a number or?
I don't have
Sort's not on there.
That's a good call.
We can share it with the committee. We can share the information on the street outreach team.
I imagine I could Google it.
I would imagine, yeah. They're at the Community Services Building on Marshall at Abbotsford Way, sort of that area.
Okay.
But that's where they are located.
Thank you.
The reason is that the number's not on here, I don't think it's on here, is this card is for, mainly for individuals for resources, so.
Yeah, we give this to people to call for resources and yeah, sort is more on.
You do one for cooperative, one for businesses.
We do have the car 87 number on here, which car 87 is the initiative of the Abbotsford Police Department, where the Abbotsford Police works with mental health psych nurses. So if you're experiencing something that is related to serious psychotic breakdown and
or
mental health
witnessing.
issues, or witnessing, then that number's on here too. So that's a fairly new program that the province and Abbey PD partner. We were involved to some degree on that for advocacy.
If I can plug our Abbotsford Police Department, they created the street outreach team. That's not common with police departments, so very innovative there. The car 87 with the registered psychiatric nurse that rides along with a police officer. So if somebody is experiencing an episode in community, often we'll see that, they can actually respond in real time and get that person the medical aid that they need. They also were the genesis behind what ended up being Cedar. So they started that not-for-profit as another arm of how do we help this vulnerable community to get services in different ways. So proud of their work.
Yeah. Awesome. Good. And the text for APD is 222973, but that's for crime, so not, it's very particular what that is. So that's any crime not in process. So, and I will speak again, clarification on the app. Garbage removal is what kind of flagged me because I did use the app, but it was not on private land, it was on city land. So for example, if you see garbage that's dumped overnight, use the app.
On the road.
Yeah, on the side of the road, use the app to report that there is illegal dumping. And I actually got a notification that someone's already reported it in this area. And I got an email the next day that said that your case has been closed and it's been cleaned up. So if there's that type of a situation, the app works really, really well. And that's not just for garbage removal, but it's for illegal dumping, I should say, but for other issues with like street signage and that sort of thing. But I like to talk about it a lot because I've been using it myself, so.
So as long as it's on city land.
Correct. Yeah.
And if you phone us and you're not sure, they'll check it out.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up because, it was a long presentation, but a lot to unpack there. And I really appreciate Mike's presentation and reiterating that city is not necessarily able to provide, we don't provide these services, but trying to work as much as we can towards coordinating everyone together and gathering more data as well. There's lots going on behind the scenes that not everybody sees. So as much as you can share that with your community, and if there's other questions, I'm sure Mike is more than happy to connect with you specifically for your industry. But the next meeting is on April 18th. We'll have it here. So if you could just make sure that you RSVP and reply to the clerk's office if you're able to attend, so we can make sure we have quorum, that would be great. And the last recommendation is that we adjourn the meeting. Does anyone want to move that? Moved by Susan, seconded by Alex P. All in favor? Passes. Great.
We have more of these.
There's a whole bunch there.
I also help
They're
yourself.
gonna be really helpful actually in our student affairs process.
Yeah, great.